Chapter 1 Merlin. Bang! Lin Fei felt himself flying through the air. His body was falling rapidly before he finally hit the ground. He felt horribly groggy, and a shrill noise of cars' brake rang in his ears. At this time, he found himself failing to open his eyes. His remaining subconsciousness could only register the chaotic noise that surrounded him. Hurry, call the police. There's been an accident. In the infinite darkness, Lin Fei thought he had witnessed a ray of light. Suddenly, he woke up wide-eyed as though he had been startled by a nightmare. His chest rose and fell as he panted for breath. He was still terrified inside. Where is this? The hospital? Lin Fei quickly checked himself as he remembered being flung into the air by a vehicle that was moving at a high speed. He found himself lying on a big, soft bed, wearing loose, fitting pajamas. There was also no injury on his body. How strange. I was thrown into the air by a car. How am I not injured at all? Besides, even if I was not injured, I should be in the hospital. Is this the hospital? It was only until now did Lin Fei raise his head to examine the room. It was a spacious room. Even the bed was draped with ornate. The vast blue sky outside of the window was visible through the thin fabric. However, gradually, Lin Fei realized something was wrong. There was no light nor air conditioner in this place. Anything electrical was not to be found. There was only a writing desk, a high stool, and a round stool. Some books bound with a string were placed on the writing desk, as well as a candlestick with 3 unfinished candles. Surprised, Lin Fei hurried to the massive mirror in the room. An unfamiliar young face appeared in the mirror. Tall nose, a long face as pale as a sheet of paper, long black hair, and a pair of uncommon blue eyes. The reflection in the mirror was no longer the face Lin Fei was familiar with. Who am I? Lin Fei mumbled as he plunked himself down on the bed. Immediately, an excruciating pain burned his head, accompanied by unfamiliar memories that came flooding his mind. Merlin? I'm Wilson Merlin. Lin Fei hastily put these unexpected fragments of memories into order. This world he had passed through was a backward one, somewhat similar to the Western Middle Ages, which was ruled by several kingdoms. He was currently situated in a middle-sized city named Blackwater, under the rule of the Kingdom of Light. Merlin's father, Old Wilson, was a lord. Even though his rank as a baron was lowest in the nobility social class, he won the title by shedding blood and tears in battles. He joined the army when he was young and performed his service for 20 years. He also accomplished brilliant achievements in the battle when the Kingdom of Light sent troops to suppress the heretic Kingdom of Black Moon in the east. After being discharged from active military service, Old Wilson was conferred upon the title of Baron by the king alongside a piece of land of a favorable size. However, Old Wilson preferred to live in the city. Hence, he only visited the fief when it came for time to collect taxes. Merlin regained great memories of Old Wilson, but his recollection of his mother was not clear. He only remembered vaguely that his mother was an Easterner who sought refuge from the Kingdom of Light, and that he has inherited his black hair from her. However, his mother passed away not long after giving birth to Merlin. Therefore, even Merlin himself could not recall her appearance. Dong, dong, dong. Just as Merlin was still immersed in his own memories, the knocking sound on the other side of the door sent him dashing to his bed as he called out, "Come in." The door to the bedroom was pushed open gently. A servant girl dressed in a gray uniform walked in with a change of clothes. "Young Master Merlin, this is your clothes for today," she said softly. Memories gushed into Merlin's mind at the sight of this servant girl. This was his personal maidservant named Lucia. "All right, leave them here, and off you go," Merlin replied. Lucia, who had kept her head low all the time, finally looked up at her young master. Her skin was fair with slight freckles, but that did not affect her beautiful appearance. "Young Master Merlin, young Lady Macy is waiting downstairs for breakfast." Merlin nodded. "Okay, I'll be down in a minute." Lucia bowed slightly, lifted her dress, and left the room without a sound. Finally, Merlin rose from his place and put on the change of clothes that Lucia had left on the desk. The comfortable white shirt was most probably made out of cotton. It was evidently purely handmade, as there was no trace of it being sewn by a machine. After putting on the black coat, Merlin scrutinized the person looking back at him from the mirror. Apart from the expression in his eyes and the slight resemblance from his past life, everything else was completely alien to him. Merlin left his bedroom for the hall downstairs and noticed his sister, Macy, sitting on the chair and poised, albeit with a face full of annoyance. Evidently, she had been waiting for a long time. "Hurry up, Merlin. We don't want to be late to the church again," Macy urged. "Oh, where are we going?" Merlin asked as he sat down on the chair. His eyebrow raised in confusion as he genuinely had no idea where they were supposed to go. Although he had retrieved much of Wilson Merlin's memories, a major fragment of it still remained unearthed. Macy widened her eyes but refrained herself from hitting the roof. She lowered her voice and explained, "Merlin, cut it off. Although Father has left to collect the taxes, he made it clear that it's obligatory for you to receive training from Swordsman Pero at the church every day." Merlin listened in silence. That one sentence that Macy said had revealed a great deal of information. Old Wilson had left for his landholdings and would not return for a while. This meant that, at least for now, he would be spared from being exposed by Old Wilson before he completely regained his memory. "Very well," Merlin replied without much enthusiasm. He then picked up the cutleries and started on his breakfast. It was bread, milk, and some really thick wheat gruel, which tasted delicious. It had given Merlin his appetite, and soon he gulped down 3 small bowls. Merlin finished his meal quickly and patted the corners of his mouth clean. Then, he began examining Macy. Macy was born by the 8th lady of Old Wilson, whose name Merlin could not exactly recall. Macy, who had not realized herself being put under the scrutiny of her brother's eyes, urged, "Let's get going, we're running out of time." Swordsman Pero is a rather strict man. Therefore, Merlin and Macy hurried into the carriage that has long awaited them and finally left for the church. Chapter 2. A Backward World. The whirring of the wheels went as the carriage moved unsteadily on the ground of Blackwater City, which was laid out with irregular bluestone. It was very uneven, and it felt a little uncomfortable traveling in the carriage. Merlin sat next to Macy, and the faint fragrance coming from her comforted Merlin. However, the carriage ride was indeed too bumpy. After a short while of trying to adapt, Merlin gave up and leaned back on the carriage, his legs slightly bent. This posture made him feel more at ease. However, Macy was very dissatisfied. She looked at Merlin's legs in front of her eyes and frowned slightly. "Merlin, can't you position your legs properly? You are a nobleman, and you must act like one." "I'll just lie down for a bit. I didn't sleep well last night," Merlin replied with indifference, still keeping the position he felt most comfortable. Unexpectedly, Macy did not argue with Merlin. She bit her lip gently, and a hint of worry washed across her face. She asked cautiously, "Is it because of Avril?" Merlin did not reply, hence Macy continued speaking. "Actually, there's no need for you to be worried. No matter what, Avril is officially engaged to you, witnessed by decades of friendship between the Parman family and the Wilson family. She will be married to you eventually. Anyhow, you have to quit fooling around as well, and spend more effort on making Avril like you better." Although Merlin kept his eyes closed, he was not really sleeping. He remembered with his heart each and every word Macy told him. "Avril is my fiancée, but, from what I gathered from Macy, it seems like Avril isn't quite fond of me. Why can't I remember anything about this matter?" Merlin only regained a fraction of his memory, and the rest was lost forever. In order to not expose himself to others, he had to listen carefully to what everyone says and analyze the information thoroughly. For instance, this Avril that Macy had mentioned must be another important piece of information. Merlin kept the knowledge in his mind. Merlin was getting rather irritated after lying down for a while. He drew the curtains and shivered as the cold breeze blew. "Winter is coming," Merlin exclaimed. It was already September, the last month of the fall season, but it seemed that the cold has arrived earlier than expected. "You're right, winter is coming, although I'm unsure why the weather has gotten cold quicker this year." Merlin wrapped his clothes tighter around himself as he curled into the corner of the carriage. It appeared to be still drizzling outside. There were not many people on the street, apart from a few tramps who knelt to the ground as they begged from the well-dressed people. These tramps clothed themselves in some rough linens that they probably collected from somewhere, and they appeared as thin as hemp ropes. Their eyes were filled with desperation. There were also several really young children among them. The others showed a look of disdain as they passed by. Some even covered their noses and mouths and sped on hastily. Merlin's eyes swept past these tramps without much interest and shifted his attention at the group of knights crowded by the street. These knights all had silver light armors wrapped around the upper body, a wooden shield in hand, and a sword of half a human's height on their back. They imposed an impressively commanding manner. The crowd on the street seemed to be very afraid of these knights, and some children, when they saw these knights, showed a hint of envy on their faces. Merlin frowned. He had no idea who these knights were, but even so, he did not dare to inquire Macy about it. Macy also noticed these knights from inside of the carriage. However, she seemed at the least impressed and said coldly, "It's them again, Knights of the City Defense Troops. A pleasant to the eye, but of no use. Judging by the large number, perhaps yet another town has been encountered with bandits. More and more disturbance has arisen recently. Many bandits appear in the small towns surrounding Blackwater City." Merlin remained silent as he registered this information into his mind. He has just arrived in this world, and his memory was made up of bits and pieces in a chaotic order. He was not in the best position to speak more. Merlin observed the situation in silence for a little longer. Although there were only about 100 of these knights, they were all well equipped, and each of them had an imposing manner. They were definitely not as useless as Macy had accounted. These knights were getting ready to leave the town, and soon they disappeared from Merlin's sight. A brief moment later, Merlin, who began to tremble because of the cold wind, finally let down the curtain and returned to the warmth of the carriage. Sometime later, the carriage gradually came to a halt. "Moss," the coachman announced softly. "Young Master Merlin, young Lady Macy, we've arrived at the church." "All right, let's get down. We're here at the church." Macy, who appeared extremely energized, jumped off the carriage at once. Merlin, who followed behind, stretched his body and moved his stiff neck. He raised his head at the sight of the church in front of his eyes. This church covered an extremely expansive area, almost as large as 4 to 5 football fields. There were ordinary believers as well as some aristocrats dressed in aristocratic costumes. They all came to the church for morning prayers. The Kingdom of Light officially established their beliefs in the God of Light. The power of the church was enormous. Almost every city had a church after the God of Light. The people that visited the church for morning prayers, as such, were endless. Merlin also followed the crowd to the church hall. On the white walls inside were several huge murals. These colorful and lively paintings were obviously religious murals that praised the God of Light. Merlin noticed that on the mural positioned in the middle right was a tall deity of vague features being surrounded with a soft, holy light. The white light shrouded many believers, including the elderly, children, men, women, nobles, commoners, and even criminals. The faces of these people were washed over with a sincere and peaceful smile under the holy light. The name of this religious mural was called "God Loves the World." It was written in the sacred language of light. Based on the memories inherited by Merlin, he was rather familiar with the scriptures written on the murals. In addition to this mural named "God Loves the World," there were also other murals such as "God Expels the Darkness," "God Brings the Light," "God Punishes the Devil," "God Descending Miracles," "God Blessing Believers," and so on. Although the murals expressed different stories, the meanings they aimed to convey were the same. All of them praised the glorious deeds of God of Light. The devout believers bowed their heads down and crossed their hands before their chest as they prayed under the guidance of the pastor. In just a minute, the sounds of prayers filled the vast church. Merlin thought of those tramps earlier on the street, and then scanned the room full of people who were praying piously. He finally realized that this was indeed a very backward world after all.